Sue Moroney.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Clause 3 of this bill is the interpretation clause, and really there's just two phrases, I should say, in this bill that it seeks to clarify. And one of them is the meaning of the word council in this bill. And it says council means the Hamilton City Council. And I just want to reflect on a contribution made earlier by my colleague Phil Twyford, who I think made a very, very good point about whether we're giving enough flexibility in naming the Hamilton City Council, because in this part of the interpretation, sorry, I should just wind back and let members of the public know that it says council, when talking about this bill, means the Hamilton City Council. Now, what Mr Twyford was raising was that why would we bind ourselves into that when the current government seems to have a penchant for forcing amalgamations amongst various councils, thereby changing their names, and therefore making pieces of legislation like this irrelevant, because in fact in this bill, that even if there was a forced amalgamation or an agreed amalgamation between Hamilton City Council and another, or a unitary authority, then we would have a piece of legislation that no longer made sense, because it would say that every time you read the word council in this bill, which will become an act, every time you read the word council, it would mean Hamilton City Council. Now, I, for one, am not in favour of forced amalgamations in my region at all, and I've been really, really clear on that. In fact, the Labour Party has made a public pronouncement that we are not in favour of forced amalgamations in the Waikato region of councils. Yep, or anywhere actually, but I specifically recall making that statement on behalf of Labour for the Waikato area. So I'm certainly not proposing that it would be Labour that would want to see that changed. But, sorry? Oh, no forced amalgamations. And so the point that I'm raising, Mr Chair, is that we may be about to sign off a piece of legislation here. Yeah, maybe Mr Ardern would like to take a call because he has rather a lot to say. We're binding ourselves into the interpretation of council always being the Hamilton City Council. Now, in years to come, that may not be the name of the council. It might be because a government might force amalgamations on other councils with it. It might be because it chooses to amalgamate with other local bodies. It might be because, as someone else I think said in the Part 1 or the Clause 1 debate, it might be because the Hamilton City Council might decide to call itself the Kirikiriroa City Council in days to come. Who knows? But here we are actually saying that every time we read the word council under the interpretation clause of this bill, that it will mean Hamilton City Council. And I certainly don't want to be responsible for coming back and wasting parliamentary time at a later date to have to actually amend this piece of legislation to actually reflect a new name for that council. So I do wonder about the wisdom of actually putting that interpretation that every time we use the word council in the context of this Act, that does mean Hamilton City Council. The other thing that the interpretation clause clarifies is that when the phrase "the land" is used in this bill, that it means the land commonly known as Parana Park. And, you know, we've already had some discussion about how actually it might be a section of the community who commonly know it as Parana Park, but in fact there's another section of the community who have a Māori name that they know that piece of land by. But never mind, this interpretation clause does say that the phrase "the land" means the land commonly known as Parana Park, and then it goes on to describe that it is comprising more or less 1.2141 hectares, and B described in the Computer Freehold Register SA12/41. But I do notice that before the Select Committee made its amendments, that in fact there was a much more thorough description of that piece of land in this interpretation clause. And I do wonder why it has been shortened down to be, I guess, I would imagine, probably a good legal description of it, but significantly less than what the original bill actually contained in terms of describing where the land is, because I would hate to see any dispute on this in the future.